cheers, dude. Here
Dude,
we go.
let's go.
Kick it off.
Thanks for making time, man.
Of course.
This is a little impromptu. We're sitting on the beach in El Salvador. Matt, I'm just going to start off by asking you what Bitcoin price in 2025 would surprise you?
Oh, would surprise me. That's a great question. Well, I mean, I think we're recording this on the 17th. I bet we hit 100K before the end of this month. We're like 92 or something like that. So we'll be at 100K plus by the end of the year. I would think it's anywhere from 250 to like 500, like the peak. I think in 25, if we hit like $1 million a coin, it would surprise me a little bit. But like if we hit $1.5 million, that would really blow my doors off. But to be honest, like I think anything's on the table next year, including $1 million Bitcoin, because last cycle we went up like 17.5x, like from what was it, like 17,000, 15,000 or whatever to like 69.70. And this cycle, like it depends where you kind of look at it as the bottom. I think because there's so much money in like on the sidelines, billions of dollars being poured into the ETFs, that we could have like basically a 17.5x run up from the price at the halving, which was like 70K. So that would be like $1,050,000. Do we reach that in 25? I think it's definitely a possibility. I wouldn't like bet against it, but like, or that would be $1,050,000. I think is like the correct math. But $1.5 million, like a 1.5 million, that would be a little wild. We would need to print a shit ton of money, and that would go all over the place. And that would probably be bad for society. So I think that at that point, that would surprise me.
Yeah, it's interesting because just the number bias, you talk about this a lot. And also I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts, Green Candle on YouTube primarily, but also on the podcast platforms. And like you've been just saying, I still think we're going to 100K. I still think we're going to 100K this year, while many other people on like a lot of other creators, influencers have been saying things like we're in the doldrums, like, you know, why isn't it moving? I saw a meme, it was like poking the bear or something like that. It's like, come on, what's going on? And then the bear, just a freaking massive green candle just coming out of it. So yeah, what are the elements? I mean, you talk about billions of dollars of capital flowing into Bitcoin, but what else are you bullish about?
Nation state adoption. I think that is coming for sure. Obviously we got Trump, RFK, talking about a strategic reserve in the U.S. But I mean, we also got Milei in Argentina, Suriname, Maya. She was at this conference here. I mean, so like, if we got Suriname and we've got, El Salvador, we've got Argentina, we got the U.S. building a strategic reserve. Who knows what else like Samson Mao and JM3 is like convincing people. We already have the Kingdom of Bhutan mining. Like nation state adoption is huge. So I think it's not only like nation state adoption, but also like businesses implementing the Sailor strategies, but like, I guess we all should start calling it, but essentially like putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet of businesses. Portnoy for Barstool, he's hilariously missed the boat like a couple times, but he's talking about it, And so like as a business owner, I think you're considering putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet just because of how successful it's making MicroStrategy, and then on a nation state level, how successful it's working for here in beautiful El Salvador, where we are right now. So I think those two things, on top of the ETFs, on top of, more and more plebs, people, just the average retail investor getting into Bitcoin. I mean, like, how can you not be bullish in this time, man? I mean, we had President Trump like a week after they tried to kill him, come to the Bitcoin conference. That's how important he thought it was. Yeah. So I think it's just, the amount of FOMO money and everything else just sitting on the sidelines it's ready for a takeoff, man, for sure.
Yeah, you're getting me fired up too. I wouldn't say like always trying to play the devil's advocate, but there's just whenever there's a narrative that is generally accepted, I just like to look at it the other way. And I think many people in the Bitcoin space, from my perspective, are overlooking some of the risks that they're taking by not only just owning MicroStrategy, but with the custodial risk of, or owning ETFs or things like that. But people are just like, yeah, I'm crushing it on my options on MicroStrategy and I'm going double leverage or long and stuff like that. Like, how do you think about risk? Are like, do you subscribe more to like the Bitcoin maxi, just not your keys, like just hold your keys, stack sat, stay humble, or is there some wiggle room to play with in sort of more of a fiat minded way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, just me personally, I have real estate, I have, and I have Bitcoin. I've sold off all my stocks because I don't think there's any return that you can get from a stock that, outside of maybe MicroStrategy or like Nvidia, like some of these ones that have just been running. But like, I don't want to be, a day trader. I don't want to do and like all this due diligence research and everything like that. I just want to like honestly like build something that I enjoy. And I think that's kind of lost in all of this, with the big, Bitcoin and, the options trading and all these things, because like our generation, we have to become like hedge fund managers essentially for ourselves, right? So I have real estate to try to get some cash flow in, which I know a lot of like Bitcoin maxis say real estate's a shit coin. I like it because of the cash flow. I don't want to sell any of my Bitcoin, or as, avoid it as much as possible. So I want to get money coming in so I could just, pay the bills with that. So, I mean, I do think, but, to answer your question fully, I think that there is room for some risk. I think, if you're the type of person that would like to do that, obviously not financial advice here, right? But I think that if you're the type of person that would want to do that, and is looking at it, why not? Try a little bit.
Yeah.
Like don't like go for broke. I think like holding Bitcoin enough. If you ask our mom and dad, our everybody else's parents is watching, like Bitcoin's risky as hell, they think, because of the volatility, right? So I think by nature, Bitcoiners have more, I guess, risk tolerance, because they got in it for the number go up initially and then they saw the volatility. But as over time, they've become, I guess, like less risk averse, because they realize it's just, nothing's a sure thing. But, if you're in Bitcoin, you believe that it's going to become, a hyper Bitcoinized world. So long story short, I think everybody can, toss a little bit in the options, kind of figure it out or whatever, maybe some fiat stuff with MicroStrategy if you'd like. But me personally, I just do like the real estate for the cash flow and Bitcoin for the savings.
Yeah, I'm actually right there with you. Real estate and Bitcoin are the only two assets I own.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think most people undervalue in their investment portfolio is their peace of mind. Like I have a roommate, shout out Rio, great guy. Shout out Rio. I've been preaching Bitcoin to him. He just moved in, and I don't know if it was just to spite me, but he bought Dogecoin, and he's checking his phone every 5 minutes, and I'm like giving him a hard time. I'm like, dude, how much is your life worth? Like, what does it cost you to look at that phone? Like, if it's not much and you don't really mind, and you actually have the ability to say, hey, I'm just going to take a small gain and get out. But most people, don't do that. Similar to like owning credit cards, 78% of people don't pay their credit card off every month. So these fiat tools, they are shiny, and from the outside it's like, oh, I can leverage these things to get a faster horse and move faster. But in the end, like when you learn and listen from the OG Bitcoiners, they tell you just especially during bull runs, like it's okay. You don't own MicroStrategy, that's fine. Maybe own 5-10%. Again, not financial advice, but I think. Let me back up and I want to ask you, because you're talking right off the bat about going to $1 million Bitcoin. Yeah. I've been thinking and talking about that for a long time, where it seems like most of the discussion is around 100K. Yeah. Now we're less than 10% from 100K. That's like, it could be 100K by the time this podcast's over, Yeah. So how do you communicate to people who have not started down the Bitcoin journey of why we're still so early?
It's a great question. I mean, like I'm getting new text messages now. I didn't get this last cycle because, I wasn't as, I guess, public with my Bitcoin position as I am now, like whether it's on my personal Instagram, all that kind of stuff with friends and whatnot. So I'm getting text messages now where normies it's interesting. It's everybody that's not in Bitcoin thinks that they could time the Bitcoin market, and they've never been in it. It's like, so I have a buddy, I've been preaching to him Bitcoin since 30K earlier this year, then 60K, and then he sent me a text message in August sending the Bitcoin price chart at 60K is like, in quotes, sarcastically, like, we're going to 100, Bitcoin's going to hit 100K this year.
Messing with you?
Yeah. And I went back to that message like earlier, and I like said that, and I was like, dude, told you then, like, just get in. And then he's like, well, if Bitcoin drops another 30-40%, I'll get in then. And it's like, dude, come on. I'm like, he's like, why won't it fail? Why won't it drop like this? And I lined out exactly what we just talked about. Do you think you're smarter than BlackRock and the biggest investment the biggest investment managers in the world? They've all got on Bitcoin. Do you think you're smarter than multiple presidents across the globe in different countries, including President Trump, RFK, and all the smart people he has in his candidates? Okay, if you think you're smarter than those two people, like, do you think you're smarter than Michael Saylor, who has turned his company from essentially a zombie company where, you know, he was going to maybe have his exit and go, you know, dance on the beach, maybe come out here to El Salvador and, you know, pop his feet up and relax. But instead he found Bitcoin and it rejuvenated him. And now he has the best performing, you know, company in the S&P 500 in the past year, depending on the day. I mean, it's between him and NVIDIA. So, you know, I mean, do you think you're smarter than all three of those people? And if you think you're smarter than all three of those, do you think that billions of dollars being poured into Bitcoin every single week and, you know, nation states buying up Bitcoin every single day, do you think that's not going to make the price of a scarce asset go up? Like, how do you not see it? It's very like difficult for me to kind of just go in and like talk to people that are just like, you know, oh, it's going to get regulated away in the US. That's a new one I've heard, is like a guy is a CPA. He spent there like talking to me, how is it different than Ethereum? And I'm like, bro, if you don't know how it's different, how are you going to tell me that it's going to get regulated away? It's already been differentiated by the SEC. And it's just, I mean, it's crazy now. All these people just think they know more about Bitcoin than you or I, who have done our 10,000 hours in it and have like, we're dedicating our lives to it. I was like, do you really think I'm that dumb to like, you know, risk my whole career on something that is just something I don't believe in, you know? So I like use all these different points to try to say like, you know, try to meet somebody where they're at. But obviously, you know, everybody in the Bitcoin space is very passionate about Bitcoin, and we just got to get, I mean, they'll come around eventually. I just keep going back to it. It's like, you know, I tell people sometimes like, you know, they'll figure it out on their own time. Just let them come to you. But like, I don't know. In this bull run, I think I'm going to start dunking on people and having too much fun, dude. I just need to.
So, yeah, man. I mean, some people, they need like the strong push. Some people need the handhold. I had another buddy made me think of him. It was 16K when I became fully like orange pilled, because I went from degenerate shitcoining in the last bull market to losing a shit ton of money. I lost like whatever, $20,000 in fiat in a year. And I had to do the research of like, okay, what did I just...
Yeah, what happened?
What happened, right? And fortunately, I had a mentor and my boss at the time who just was very bullish and just kept telling me like, you know, with a long-term time horizon, like it won't matter if you bought at 50 or 60 or 90K, like it just won't matter, because the asset is so scarce that, kind of on a side note, but like people can't wrap their head around a scarce asset because it's never existed in human history.
That's a point.
This is
right
one
there.
thing I tell a lot of people is like, if a stock like Amazon or Microsoft goes up too high, the CFO, CEO, they get together and they say, well, people are not buying our stock because it's, you know, $4,000 now. Let's split it 10 ways or 100 ways and drop it down to 400 or 40 or whatever. MicroStrategy did that just last year. So MicroStrategy stock went from, I think it was 1,600 down to 160.
Yeah.
And now everyone's talking about it going back up to 10,000. But the entire, like the goalpost shifted, you know, and Bitcoin doesn't have that luxury. So looking at it from how Jesse Myers looks at it, where it's like, what is the potential, like the total addressable market of Bitcoin? And basically what percentage of the global capital in the world today, in today's dollars, 900 trillion, quadrillion dollars, what percentage of that can potentially flow to Bitcoin over what time frame, you know?
Yeah. And
I think, you know, it's 10% minimum in 20 years. That's conservative. It could be 20, 30, 40%. I mean, I really don't know. And the other side of it though, which I do think is fair, is like, the biggest, most powerful entities in the world, these banks, I mean, BlackRock's buying Bitcoin, so they have their own Bitcoin, not just selling fees to their customers. So are they going to go down without a fight, or are they going to lose their grip on the issuance of currency without like really things being ugly? I do think there is dark and challenging days ahead. And coming from like we're here in El Salvador, the energy's so high. People are talking about the renaissance of Bitcoin and how humanity is going to flourish and thrive. I think that still there are major challenges ahead. But I would rather, this is my personal take, I would rather just be on the side of Bitcoin than on the sidelines or holding fiat, because the risk of holding fiat is guaranteed loss of purchasing power.
1,000%.
So if you hold anything that's denominated in fiat, like it has to outperform 8% a year just to break even. So yeah, the S&P 500 does 10% a year. So you're making like a 2% nominal gain. Bitcoin, in its worst performing 4-year streak in its history, to my knowledge, was a 23% compound annual growth rate. Yeah. So I guess my question is just to ask you, like, what do you think the biggest threats to Bitcoin are?
I used to think it would be something like along the lines of regulation in the US, but now with President Trump in, and even the reaction from like the Harris campaign where she almost decided to come and speak at the Bitcoin conference, I think the US and like the politicians are realizing Bitcoiners have money, they have power, they have influence, and you need to have them on your side in order to help win elections. And what do politicians want? They want to be in power. They want to win elections. So they're going to, whether you think it's LARPing or genuine, they're going to try to be, I mean, they were there 2 years ago. There were, people running for the House, Senate, all that kind of stuff. They were popping up on Twitter Spaces, popping in. Some of them had no idea. RFK was at, the Bitcoin conference last year in 23, and the difference from 23 to 24 was insane. And, I think I'm hoping Trump does something similar. Maybe he's not going to, I don't think Trump is as well spoken and concise as RFK, because he likes to go as, his ad libs and kind of stuff like that. So,
the weave.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that So, I initially, long story short, I thought it was like some regulation, but I just don't see a world where that's happening. Now, that would probably be the biggest threat, I guess, in the US initially, because, if we just try to regulate it away, obviously like the ETFs, all these things like that I'm super bullish on, and all this money's being poured in, if they just do a complete 180 and like, the choke point 2.0, they eliminate a lot of on-ramps for Americans, that would be difficult. But I just I don't see that happening anymore. This past 6 months, so much has changed in that. Now, outside of that, man, I don't know. It's like a genuine thing I'm getting on myself is because I do try to do what you said earlier, right? Play devil's advocate. What would happen for me to be bearish on Bitcoin, And I just I'm at the point now where everybody is catching up to where everybody that is in power has money is catching up to where Bitcoiners have been for a decade plus. Whenever you got into Bitcoin, whether it's, I started learning about it at 16, 17. So 8 years now, it's all right, I used to think all the FUD, maybe the media perception, all this kind of stuff, but everybody's coming around now. And I don't know if it's just because of the vibes of, this bull run, but everybody is what's this Bitcoin thing? I'm interested. It's not going away. Even a couple years ago, I had friends saying oh, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're the two biggest, so I imagine they'll be there forever. So even normies that don't even have any are telling me I don't see how this can go away. So it's hard to say. I'd be curious to hear what you got to say, man. What do you think?
I'm not a technical guy, but I went to a Bitcoin a devs meetup a couple weeks ago, and I was very humbled. Bitcoin humbles,
Yeah.
And so I've been down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, but I don't know the technicals to the level that some of these people do. So I think there is down the road potential for it's such low odds. There's scaling issues, quantum computing, a freaking EMP nuking the world. There's easy rebuttals to all those things. What I do think is a legitimate concern is the fact that Bitcoin is not fully private. Like, it's not actually, if you use a KYC on-ramp, your Bitcoin is basically tracked to the chain. So I was sitting we had this guy pop in an Uber with us on the way to the conference the other day, and it was so funny, man. He was just immediately telling us about how he turned $50,000 into $1 million buying Tesla options and all this stuff, and he's gonna do it again, and now he's getting into Bitcoin, and he was all excited and just sharing like stuff that a real Bitcoiner, first of all, they never tell you what their stack size is, and they're not gonna project their success financially. A lot of these people, you'd see them on the street, you wouldn't even know. You'd say that guy's, on his way to go do some normal day-to-day job. You have no idea that he's, instrumental in the most important technological revolution in human history, like for say Adam Back or one of these guys. But I do think that the podcast you had recently with Michelle Weekly, she made a good point about Bitcoin being a CBDC. Yeah. And basically, yes, Bitcoin is permissionless, it's uncensorable, but if the government can still show up at your door with 10 FBI agents or whatever, or like a SWAT team, or if let's fast forward 8 years from now and inflation is on the rise, people are struggling, they're looking for a finger to point. I don't think this is going to happen, because I think the mainstream corporate press news doesn't have the same control that they used to, and the truth will win through independent media. But let's say Elon Musk, I'm just kind of playing out like real like wild scenarios, but I like to think about these things like 8 years from now we have a democratic anti-Bitcoin regime come into office after massive money printing, and people are struggling, gas prices are $10, and people are saying, well, why is this happening? Oh, it's because Bitcoin is killing the US dollar. Bitcoiners were lucky, they were early. The ECB had that article recently. It was like, Bitcoin holders benefit. Like, it was really rich to hear that from them, right? Yeah. Like the money printers pointing the finger at the people that are trying to deploy freedom technology. Yeah. It's just so backwards and inverted. So I do somewhat worry that Bitcoiners are getting complacent right now about just how much we're winning, because the price is ripping and people are stoked. And I guess that would be my 2 cents of like, what did you think when Michelle shared like her take on CBDC?
Well, her thing is more on like the fiat regulation relative to that. Is like basically we could almost make it fiat 2.0, where, because like right now, if you have a Visa, MasterCard, American Express, whatever, they have all that information. They already know where you spend all your money. Like, Bitcoiners are a different breed, but to be honest with you, I never have cash. Never have cash. Like, even in high school, my mom would always be like, you should have cash on you. You should have cash on it. Like, that's just not society anymore. I think it's like 90% of the US dollars in circulation cannot be printed, or are not printed like physically. It's just a number on a screen. So they already have that information. I do think like, if we get that regulation, it would be worrisome, but like, how is that any different than what we're in right now? It would be like, essentially just something like, all right, maybe the Canadian truckers, like, they're freezing bank accounts, they freeze your Bitcoin wallet, if it's Strike or, whatever, one of these ones that it's like KYC. So essentially she thought like, a lot of the fiat rails that we're putting in place, or the fiat regulation, would essentially make Bitcoin like fiat 2.0, which I can see it's an open source ledger, right? You can see every transaction back and forth, but it's not any different than what they could potentially do now. They have all that information already. Visa, MasterCard, American Express, wherever you have your card, you tap it, they have all that information. They have it all stored already. So, theoretically that could already happen. They haven't done it. The US is unique where, we still have the First and Second Amendment, freedom of speech, all that kind of stuff. So it would be something that, could potentially, start an uproar, right? If people start, regulating too much. And I think we're kind of seeing that a little bit right now. That's why Trump got, overwhelming majority, and his basically whole position was like, I'm going to bring in everybody outside of the government to help flip this thing on its head. So I see the argument because of the open source, ledger kind of stuff with Bitcoin, but I just don't see like the regulation getting to that point. Now it could, right? I just would put a very low percentage chance personally, I think we have a higher percentage chance of hitting $1 million per Bitcoin next year than those regulations coming on in the next 4 years at least. So, and that gives people time to build, gives people, to give more tools. But on the flip side of things, I do think the US is being, I guess, smart in their sense, where they're eliminating Lightning wallets like Wallet of Satoshi, all these things in the US because they don't want you to have the non-KYC. They just want to know where you're spending it. You know why? Taxman's always going to come knocking. So that's where I think it's going to be, more on the regulation side of things. On the flip side, I think they also understand that if they make it, taxing out the ass to spend Bitcoin or use it, transact it, buy a coffee, that people are going to leave, vote with their feet. And so, I think they might try to do some of that stuff, but we've already seen like a reversal on some of those policies in Italy. Italy was going to tax Bitcoin and crypto at like 45%, opposed to like the 25 or something like that they have in normal capital gains. They reversed that in less than a month. That's what I would see would happen in the US. Same kind of deal where it's such a powerful asset class at this point. I mean, it's like what, top 10 biggest asset by market
silver,
cap.
right?
Yeah, just past silver.
Crazy.
So all this stuff, like how can you try to regulate that, and not see the writing on the wall that this can bring jobs because it's a different industry and it's just so rapidly growing. But hey, it's going to get regulated away, and Bitcoin's going to drop 30 to 40%, and everybody who doesn't have Bitcoin is going to tell you it's not going to work, right?
Right. So what's your take on, well, actually, before I ask you this, one thing that I point to about why I'm optimistic about Bitcoin changing the world is because we live in this digital nomad world where top talent can just move across jurisdictions. So if you're like a high earning person in any country in the world, you are welcome to come to El Salvador, to come build businesses, to go to UAE. People like British Hodl was talking about how he left his home country. The guy's a value creator, and now he's in UAE. He even said on the podcast with you that he would go back if they changed the policies to be not so insane.
Yeah.
But I do think that the fact that people can move with their feet so easily, work online, and the days of like needing to be in a specific geographic region are over, holds governments more accountable. So they don't have the leverage over people to just be like, well, we're just going to squash you. And if you live in this jurisdiction, you're going to abide by our rules. Like, they can chase you down. And the US is one of the only countries that if you don't pay taxes, even living abroad, they'll come after you.
Yeah.
But I think those things, like if you want to compete in the free market of attracting top talent, you gotta have competitive, like why do the best top talented people work at Google and Facebook and these big tech companies? It's not because they pay the most and they have the best benefits. It's the best working environments, things like that. Next question I want to ask you about is your take on the cycles. So there's always people trying to figure out or make sense of Bitcoin's price movements. And from where I sit, it seems that like Sam Callahan and Lynn Alden just had that whole piece that they found that yes, Bitcoin tracks global liquidity. It tends to trend with global liquidity more so than any other asset. It trades 365, trades 7 by 24 by 365. What's your take on cycles versus super cycle versus some of these other models like the power law or things like that?
I think the power law is bullshit. I had Giovanni on the podcast. He sat me through the entire thing for like 2 hours. So I feel like I'm well versed enough to know that, it's like found in nature, but Bitcoin is like not something that it's created by humans, right? So it's not something that is found in nature necessarily. I mean, I get it with the energy markets and all that kind of stuff. But my thought process is with the prices and everything like that, the cycles is, if you look at a business cycle, right? The traditional fiat business cycle, it's usually 4 years and it's pretty volatile, right? And in my opinion, Bitcoin follows closely to the business cycles. I don't believe that the halving is really going to drive price anymore. It's the psychos like you and I who try to hold on, we'll eat ramen noodles for fucking, 3 weeks because we're just not willing to sell our coin. And there's a lot of people like that, whether they've lost their keys or just like refuse to sell. That behavior, along with the little bit of the price or the reward fluctuation. But I mean, if you look at it, 3% of all Bitcoin that's ever going to be in circulation is already in circulation. So 7-8%, is that really driving the price? My opinion, no. That's a limited amount. So I believe in the cycles, but I don't believe it's like the traditional, more so like based on the halving. I think it's more based on like the fiat business cycle, and the business cycle goes those 4 years. And you're right. I mean, Lynn and Sam are right. It's about global liquidity, but I'd argue all assets are based on global liquidity. And so like if you look at Bitcoin, if you even look at like GameStop and some of these other like crazy meme coins or whatever, they probably line up pretty well, where you see the run up with global liquidity, and then all of a sudden without it, it doesn't, it's nowhere to be found. So long story short, I believe in the cycles, but maybe not necessarily for the reason that everybody else believes in them. I believe it's more on like the business cycle opposed to the halving cycle.
I want to ask you, what's one thing or a couple things that you've learned through doing your podcast?
Oh my God. I mean, one thing is tough to narrow it down. I mean, I think, so I guess let's back it up here. I started the podcast kind of selfishly to speak with brilliant people like, yourself and others in the space, so I can learn, become a better investor, protect my wealth more for myself. And I've learned like everybody's kind of, I guess, relating it to Bitcoin, everybody's come to Bitcoin for some different reasons. Something sparked in them, and that's something resonated with them, and it's different for each person. And that's why, they're there right now, or they're here right now. But I mean, the lessons I've learned from like, whether it's macro trends, like learning all these different things, like it's hard to pin it on just one single thing. But I think like, it's helped me reflect on my upbringing, like who I am, why I believe in Bitcoin, just from having these conversations, and further, I guess, reaffirmed my belief in Bitcoin. So I guess the one thing I've learned is, Bitcoin is inevitable, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And I don't know if I necessarily needed the podcast for that, but it just reaffirms it every single time I talk to a Bitcoiner.
And what's the goal of the podcast? Like if you have like a vision for 2, 3, 4 years from now, like what do you hope that the impact that it has?
Yeah, man, I want to be the barstool of Bitcoin and finance. I want to bring joy to people when, financial topics and a lot of Bitcoin content is, kind of doom and gloom, man. That doesn't really resonate with me. I feel like I'm a very positive person. I like to go have fun, screw around, If you spend some time around me, I'm sure I'll crack a joke, talk some shit to you.
Very true.
Yeah. So I like to just, mess around, laugh, do all that. So I hope the podcast will bring more people into Bitcoin and make it more approachable, man. Because I think like you said, you got humbled really quick when you went to a BitDevs meetup. I think a lot of people think of Bitcoin and that's what they think of. They think of, oh shit, mining, what is this, lightning coding, like all this, like I have no idea what it is, right? But in reality, it's very simple. Bitcoin is a fixed supply, and you just got to flip your original thought of, oh, everything's going to increase, where if you price everything in Bitcoin, everything's going to decrease. I introduced some guys from that are, running their business on a Bitcoin standard that do coffee. And he said on his website, he puts a graph of his prices in sats over time. And it's just basically like a straight shot down. So I think, kind of flipping that mindset is very important. And I don't know what the beginning question of this was. Now I'm getting lost, but
I don't remember either.
Yeah.
No,
but,
what do you, the impact of the podcast?
The impact of the podcast.
Dude,
yeah. So the impact of the podcast, I think, is basically to help people flip that and think more in like a Bitcoin way, where, you know, instead of using digital scarcity, to think about abundance. Because, you know, right now we have inflation where, you know, you give me $5, the average person is going to try to go spend that ASAP because, you know, hey, I can buy a $5 footlong from Subway 5 years ago, and that footlong now is $7.50. It's like, oh, well, it only went up $2.50. Well, it's a 50% increase in, like, you know, a few years.
Yeah, and they're giving you two less slices of meat.
Yeah.
The cheese is thinner.
Yeah, they don't have Jared working for them, thank God. But I just think, with all this stuff, just to kind of try to make the financial topics like a little bit more approachable, because I think that's really important. I don't think everybody's going to resonate with the doom and gloom, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners have seen it, and so now they can't unsee it. But enjoy life, man. Have fun. Like, sit here, like, hey, we're having a couple beers, just chatting it up. Like, we're probably going to go to hit a pool party later today or something, go sit on the beach, like, relax. Like, most people don't want to think about money. But if I can make it in an approachable way where, hey, it's not a drag to listen to, it's not like, you put it on with your girlfriend or whatever and they enjoy it, or, I'm talking with an NFL or, some pop culture guy and or gal, and they're like, yeah, Bitcoin changed everything for me because of this. And, maybe that resonates with you, and, just bring on more people and they have fun with it. I think there's more to Bitcoiners than just Bitcoin, and I'm trying to help bring that out.
Absolutely, man. That's what this podcast is all about. Like, we are Satoshi. The idea is, I was listening to Seb Bunny's talk on the stage at Madeira he basically inspired the name of the podcast. Many people use this phrase, we are all Satoshi. The idea is like Satoshi gifted Bitcoin to the world, stepped away from it, walked away from it. There's no other cryptocurrency that's decentralized in that way. Every single other cryptocurrency, there's 1 or 5 or a small number of people that control the issuance. They can change. It's the only fully decentralized cryptocurrency. So once you adopt Bitcoin, then the question is, okay, what gifts are you bringing to the world? So I articulate that to people that don't understand Bitcoin. Sometimes are like, what the hell are you talking about? But yeah, I mean, clearly you're bringing a gift to the world in your podcast, being the Barstool. That's a big gap, man. There's no other podcasts that I can think of that approach Bitcoin in this like very optimistic way. Speaking of which, I realized, so I've been trying to orange pill people for 2 years now. It took me a while to get to the point where I'm like really trying to push it on people. And, you kind of go back and forth, like, should I just live my own life and just hold my keys and hold my Bitcoin and just let other people, not be on the life raft? But I realized, like, I'm willing to take the awkward, like, social whatever, like, people that judge you, or my family sometimes, they're like, just, dude, like, can we have one dinner where we don't talk about Bitcoin? But it's almost impossible for me, because whenever anybody talks about anything, like especially challenges in the world, I'm like, okay, and do you realize that is just directly linked to Bitcoin? So my entry point to a lot of conversations, especially with like people that don't own any or don't know anything about it, is like, oh yeah, hey, you want to know why I'm optimistic about the future? People in our generation, they don't want to have kids. They never think they're going to own a house. They think the environment's going to shit. Like, they're just pessimistic about the future. And for me, Bitcoin is hope. It's like optimism. Like, I really don't know personally. I was reflecting on this recently while I was journaling. Like, I don't know what my life would look like right now without Bitcoin.
I mean, that was like I had a talk here, so shameless plug, but my talk was why Bitcoin is a safe haven in hyperinflation. And what I like to revert it back to is, maybe we're not in hyperinflation yet. Maybe we get there, maybe we don't. I don't know. But exactly like you said, you don't know what your life would be like without Bitcoin. I don't either. But you know what it has allowed me to do? It has allowed me to pursue my passion. It has allowed me to start Green Candle and invest. and, you know, give myself some runway to not make money, but invest in myself and try it out. I mean, we were talking about this pre-show, dude. Like, without Bitcoin, I wouldn't have been able to be here today. I wouldn't have been able to, you know, invest money into my business in order to, you know, be happier. I mean, you know, at a certain point, I know like a lot of Bitcoiners have the hodl mentality, but in my opinion, like Bitcoin allows you to figure out what you want to do. It gives you more time, man. And time, you know, is the most valuable asset that anybody can have over Bitcoin, everything. So it gives you more of that back. And, you know, whether it's your business, whether it's, hey, like, you know, instead of working till I'm 65, I'll work till I'm 50 or maybe even 40, who knows, you know, I could retire a little bit early, see my kids grow up, have kids earlier, get the house, whatever it is. Like, Bitcoin can allow you to do that. And it's so powerful because, like you said, people in our generation just do not have that. Like, it's I spoke at the University of Tampa Crypto Club. I try to get them on Bitcoin and change it to a Bitcoin club, but they're, you know, shout out to them. They're working on it, right? But anyway, it's depressing how many 18 to 21, 22-year-old kids are worried they're never going to buy a house. Already, right now, today in 2024, they're worried I will never buy a house. And University of Tampa, like, by all accounts, it's a very nice school. It's a private school. These kids' parents have money, let's be honest, right? But they're worried about it. Imagine what somebody who's like, you know, parents are barely scrapping by, who they're taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of loans in order to try to get a better education, in order to further themselves, because that's the way that society frames everything. Bitcoin would allow them to potentially pay off their loans quicker, right? It would allow them to do so much other things. And so that's why I feel like a lot of us are passionate about it too, because it changed our lives and it could change everybody else's. And, you know, it's everybody out there right now, I think, is just very depressed, down in the dumps when it comes to all this stuff, you know, and I think that's why part of the reason we saw so many like overwhelming people go for Trump this time, because, you know, they want to change. But, you know, it starts with every individual first. Part of that change can be just saving in Bitcoin. It's a simple change, but that could drastically change your life. And that's why I think like a lot of us are just so passionate about it, because it's changed our lives. And I think, you know, for the future generation, we need to get more of these kids into just Bitcoin opposed to, you know, taking these risky options or sports betting or whatever it is, because that's the stuff that's being pushed on them right now.
The sports betting is just out of control.
Look, I like to dabble a little bit on it, so I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, we're recording this during the Bears-Packers game because I love you, Kyle. But,
appreciate you.
You know, I can't watch the Bears anymore, but I mean, you know, I do like to throw a little bit on there just to make it a little interesting, but it's like $5, $10, $20.
But you're aware that it's degenerate gambling.
Yeah,
just having fun. Yeah.
But I know so many people that are like, dude, check this out. I got this 10-team parlay. And it's like the percent chance of that hitting is like so low. But they hear of these people who bet 50 cents and, you know, a 16-team parlay, and it turned it into $1 million. And those success stories, you know, make people think that it's going to happen to them. That's just not happening to you. I'm sorry. I hate to break it to you here. But you have basically a sure bet here with Bitcoin, not financial advice, that it's going to help you change your life. And just take the bet, man. Whether it's $20, $50,
get off
$100, get off zero.
100%.
Give yourself enough to make you just start looking into it. And that's what I tell everybody.
I'm right there with you. I used to think, when I was a little bit younger, I used to think that I had to start a business and sell it for millions of dollars in order to ever accumulate wealth. Like, if you just do math, you have to make like a salary of, especially where I live in Seattle, like you can make $100,000 a year and still not be saving much money at all, just because your rent is $3,000 a month for a decent place, and food is so expensive. And I think what people really want is, at least this is just my perspective, like most people actually don't want to be rich. They might want to like, it might look like they want that short-term like payoff, but it's only because they've been so like nihilistic because of the system that's set up to make it seem like you have no chance. And a lot of people, they don't even realize that you can buy $10 of Bitcoin. It's like, well, $90,000 is just too much for me. It's like, okay, well, buy 0.1. This is the question that you ask a lot of people is like, what's a good goal for the average person? Like when you're at zero, like, should you think about trying to get to 1 Bitcoin? Is that too much to think about? Should you try and get to 0.1 Bitcoin? How do you personally think about that?
I think you should try to stack as much as you can to get to 1 Bitcoin. I think the 0.21 is for people who are, just more intimidated by it. But I think it's always to shoot for a target that maybe you can't get to. Like I was telling somebody about this the other day. Maybe it was my boy Hellion, shout out to him. But it was like, I really like this Matthew McConaughey speech, like really spoke to me, where he's like, they're like, who is your hero? He's like, me in 10 years. Then somebody found him like 10 years later, is like, are you your hero yet? He's like, no, it's still me in 10 years because I'm always shooting to be better. I'm always shooting to go for it. And I think that's how everybody should aim in Bitcoin, is just go for the 1. There's only 21 million, there's a fixed supply. Who cares if it keeps running up? Like, don't get satisfied at 0.21 or whatever it is. Keep stacking, keep going, keep trying to save for it. Maybe you spend some here. It fluctuates over time. It's not a linear straight up that you're just consistently stacking stats over time, but shoot for 1. Why not? I think, okay, the average person, you're not going to be able to buy 90,000. Who knows if it gets to $1 million a coin? Whatever, try to find things you could do to provide more value, to make more income or earn more sats or whatever you're thinking. Why not shoot for 1? I think like a lot of people just have that like limited mindset. And I get like Bitcoin's the scarcest asset, and it's like we're saying, it's like, a sure bet almost. Like it's, the only thing that is physically scarce and doesn't degrade over time. Like we're sitting in this beautiful home here where it's got, ocean view, all that kind of stuff. But every single aspect of this house will degrade over time. This couch will be worth less tomorrow than it will be worth today. That table, these pillows, everything, the camera equipment even too, all these things is going to be worth less over time, but Bitcoin won't. So keep shooting to save for that and keep it building, until you feel satisfied. I mean, it really depends on like the price action, right? On when you can retire, so to speak. But I think everybody should be shooting for the stars. And if you miss, you land amongst the clouds, right? That's what they say. So I think just keep going for it, man. Just try as hard as you can to stack for that 1 Bitcoin.
I love it. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Set the goal high, but at the same time, don't let the like chase of fiat come into your Bitcoin journey. That's something I see a lot of people doing. It's like Bitcoiners can be generally a little bit, they have like a hoarding mentality. Like, I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. This is an asset. I heard Pompliano, I tweeted back at him when he said this. I was like, he says his Bitcoin is his savings account, but spending Bitcoin is an idiot tax because you got to pay taxes on the Bitcoin. It doesn't make sense to spend. I was like, those two things seem contradictory to me. Like, so it's your savings account. What's your savings account for? It's for living a better life in the future. So you're telling me that accessing your savings is an idiot tax? Like, seems pretty antithetical. I subscribe more to what Parker Lewis has been talking about, this thing, the exchange theory of value. Bitcoin is only valuable because it is accepted. Someone else will buy it from you. Yeah. So if you live in a place where you need fiat, like here in El Salvador, you live in Berlin, you live in El Zante, like you can pretty much live on a Bitcoin standard where you don't even have a bank account, you don't have fiat at all. That's not the case where I live. There's like almost no merchants in Seattle that accept Bitcoin. I'm trying to, convince, my haircut, my barber, whatever, more people to accept it, but not like, I don't have to do that. Like, I could sell the Bitcoin and get to fiat, but I genuinely want to like bring them on the lifeboat, which is something I wanted to say when you were talking about your last answer. But there's unlimited room on the life raft. It's not in fiat. It's a zero sum game. It's like, okay, there's only so much. Well, there's unlimited fiat, but what I'm saying is like the mentality is scarcity. Versus Bitcoin, it's kind of funny because it's a scarce asset, but the mentality is abundance. And so, I just think bring as many people on as you can. If people think you're an idiot or you're dumb or you're taking risk, that's on them.
Yeah.
How do you answer the question when someone says, so you're not diversified? Like, what do you say to that?
I guess I'm technically diversified because I got the real estate, right? I just think like, all right, like let's put your portfolio against mine. Bitcoin, diversification is to protect wealth. You don't get wealthy diversifying. Every rich person I've ever talked to in my life says that exact same thing. If you're worried about losing, all right, let's bring it back to a sports reference. When you know that the coach is playing to not lose when they have a big lead, what happens? The other team comes back
100%.
Every fucking time. And I'm speaking to you guys and the Chicago Bears, quit playing to lose because you guys are killing me every Sunday. But that's what happens no matter what the sport is, soccer, football, baseball, whatever. When you start playing not to lose, you end up losing, right? Because you're looking at that. And I think, Bitcoin is something where you play to win the game, dude. Go buy Bitcoin. Like that is a winning mentality. So when you are trying to preserve your wealth over time, what's going to happen? Fiat is going to keep inflating away. So preserving your wealth does not exist. It does not exist in this current fiat system. Bitcoin allows you to protect yourself and increase your spending power because everything else is decreasing. So it's, that's the only way I see it. And that's why I don't really believe in diversification, because what the hell is protecting your wealth? It's a losing game, because, all right, like I protect, like, for example, I love my parents to death, but they've got a financial advisor. They will not listen to me on Bitcoin. In 2020, my mom was very happy because the financial advisor did not lose them any money. Literally 0% return through 2020. The S&P 500 had a 20% return. All the motherfucker had to do was not sell. That's all he had to do. Just, hey, mama keys, cool it for a second, We don't need to sell, we're okay. That's all he had to do. And what did he do? He hit the sell button, he hit the buyback button, and now it's even, right? After a full year of 20% gain. And what happened in that year? In those next 2 years, 40% of the money supply was printed. So you would have been able to protect it by half of the amount that money was prevented if the financial advisor, my parents, just kept that. So what happened, right? Now my parents are like worried about them actually going to retire, in the next couple years because their financial advisor sold. Like, what are we talking about here? They're diversified. They're protecting themselves, protecting their wealth, but they're worried about it. It just doesn't add up. The math ain't math in here, So it's very simple in Bitcoin, and that's why I think, the diversification is all a misnomer, and it's something that we've been sold on our entire life to protect ourselves. But what is $1 million now, man? Like, getting on the S&P 500, it's stacking it that way, like becoming a millionaire by 30, 40, whatever it is. That's not a lot of money anymore. It's not the bar. And that's because, like, if you were to try to do these small little wins and bring up, it doesn't work, man. It just doesn't work in the environment that we're in. And so that's why I don't really believe in diversification.
It's a fantastic answer. And my parents have a financial advisor too. And in August 2020, I got on the phone with my financial advisor's son. I'm not going to say their name because, I'm not trying to throw too much shade on them, but they're great people. They're quality human beings. They just, I got on the phone with them and I was like, hey, I've got some cash and I need some advice for where I should put it. He told me that I would have a better finger on the pulse just putting my money in stocks for products that I use on a daily basis. So, or just companies that I see personally as like on the rise. So in 2020, I bought, Adobe, because I use the Adobe suite. I bought, some Tesla. I bought things. I don't have a Tesla, but I just bought companies that I thought were cool. And like generally that strategy worked. But on that same phone call, I asked him, I said, what do you guys think about Bitcoin? And they said, we know nothing about it. We don't advise it. It doesn't have any cash flow. Basically told me like, don't buy it. They didn't say don't buy it, but they said, we know nothing about it. The price of Bitcoin was $6,000 at the time.
Yeah.
And so I did buy Bitcoin at that time.
There we go, baby. Cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers to that, man. And just this past spring, I got back on the phone with them, and I was like, so guys, like, remember that last phone call we had 3 years ago or whatever? Like, Bitcoin's now, $68,000. And yeah, man, I guess my question is, are financial advisors just obsolete? Like, they take a percentage of your wealth every year to just underperform against Bitcoin.
They've always been obsolete. You've never needed a financial advisor. I have, like, my parents, they've gone through a lot of waves in their life. So 2008 hit them very hard, and it was a very tough time for my family. But luckily, we've come out on the other side, and everything's, doing a lot better, since then. But we're in this neighborhood that, I guess, in Austin, Austin 25 years ago when my parents moved there, 26 years ago, was not the Austin, Texas that you know today. And when they moved there, we didn't have a neighborhood, or we didn't have a grocery store 45 minutes to our house, like all this stuff. But now, we have all these people moving into my neighborhood, former professional athletes, like all this stuff. So there's a bunch of money being pumped in just to my neighborhood, elevating my parents' house price, all that kind of stuff. Great things for them. They got very lucky, right? But long story short, they've been able to talk to a lot of people who have, accumulated a lot of wealth over time. And a lot of those people don't have financial advisors. They just don't. They're like, we know exactly what they do. They buy S&P 500, they buy 2 or 3 of the different ones, and they just let it ride. Why do you need one to do that? All a financial advisor is there for exactly like you said, like, hey, let me talk this through with you.
Yeah, hold your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I was just talking to my mom too, and she's like, yeah, I think we should sell some of our Verizon stock because it's negative. We want a tax loss harvest. I'm like, great. So you're making your own financial decisions anyways.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the only thing that you would need basically a financial advisor for at that situation, like how much should we sell in order to, tax loss harvest. Yeah. I mean, that's really it. Like and like in reality, you can do all this stuff by yourself. It's just how much time you want to allocate to it. Some people just don't like thinking about their finances at all. I guess I get that, but to me, and I think everybody in the Bitcoin space, we're all psychos, and we all think about, money coming in, coming out, all that kind of stuff. So I think, man, I think financial advisors, I think they're always going to be around, but I've never really believed in them. I've always told my parents, same kind of deal, like, if you guys want me to manage the money or whatever, I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing, and I'll tell you why. And I probably would have beat the financial advisor because I would have had my parents buy Bitcoin, But, what can you do? It's just everybody kind of has their own opinion. Like I said earlier, everybody has their own opinion on Bitcoin. You're telling me when Bitcoin was at 6,000, you were asking people. I remember I had a girlfriend at the time. I was buying Bitcoin. I didn't really tell her about it. And then I told her, like, when it dropped to like 3,000-4,000 in 2020, that big drop down. And I told her, like, hey, I was putting in like a couple $100 every paycheck. It's like, hey, I just doubled how much I'm putting in there because I'm like, if I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, this is my first job ever, and I've been working it for a month or a year and a month or two or something, and this could change my life drastically. Or I'm wrong and I fucked up and I lost a couple $1,000s, which in reality of things is not a lot of money over time, and I'll be able to earn that back. And she started crying. She did tears, bawling. Like, I can't believe you're doing this, all this risk, all this and that. I talked to my parents, they talked to their financial advisor. They didn't believe in Bitcoin. Like, why are you doing that? We weren't even married or anything like that at the time. We were just dating. But anyway, long story short, everybody has an opinion on it when they don't know, which I always find is ridiculous. And that's why I think like financial advisors will always be obsolete, because nobody's going to do your own research like you will. And, in reality, you're going to be the one that, figures out why you want to invest in something. And if it's Bitcoin, then, and you have the most conviction, you're not going to be the one that's hitting that sell button.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, I want to ask you about El Salvador.
Okay.
How many times have you been here? What's your read on the place? Is this somewhere that the question is that you get asked a million times at these things is, are you thinking about moving here? Like, is this a place you would move? Like, are you going to, spend more time here? Like, what's your general, just observations?
Yeah. I mean, like, all right. If I would have it my way, I would probably never move out of the U.S. I love America. I really do. I mean, people that are very anti-America, maybe they'll start coming around again. I don't know now that we got a new president coming in, but I mean, America's my home. My family's there. I always want to stay there. Now, El Salvador on the flip side is gorgeous. I mean, it's beautiful. How can you beat this? I also live in Florida too, so I mean, I got beaches as well near me, which is great. But the different climates and everything like that directly close. I could see myself spending more time here for sure. There's a ton of development. It's my second time here. I came here last year for adopting Bitcoin, and then I'm here again. So shout out to the organizers for having me 2 years in a row. Let me blow some hot air into a microphone.
Yeah, you're on stage. You're MCing. You're giving talks.
I'm trying, dude. I'm trying. Yeah. I'm trying to make it out into this world. But it's beautiful, man. Like, this is the first time I stayed out towards the beach. Last time I stayed in the city. I mean, it's a little different than most Bitcoiners who are like kind of like get off the grid kind of thing. But I enjoy big cities. I enjoy being around people. I have a huge social battery. If you meet me, you'll probably, think the same thing. Like, he's crazy. How does he keep going and all this stuff? But yeah, I mean, I just really enjoy being around people. And I just don't think like San Salvador is like big enough for me, kind of. But for a vacation to come network and learn with Bitcoiners, I mean, I'll come down here all the time. I'll be down here at least once a year for the foreseeable future, maybe twice a year. Who knows? Maybe I'll be down for Plan B in January. I know, I like to travel around and bounce around. I can't sit still, man. So yep. I'll definitely be back, and I do love El Salvador, and what Nayib Bukele is doing here is absolutely incredible. Even in the past year alone, since I came here last year, and I'll here this year, and I'll probably be here next year. Like, you see so much development going on, and things are changing so rapidly. But I don't know if I don't ever really see myself moving here. I think as of right now, the only place I really see myself, I'm in Tampa. Only place I could really see myself maybe is in Miami or something, and that's if the podcast is going pretty well and it's just easier access guests in Miami opposed to Tampa. But I do love the sunshine, the beaches, the mountains here too. But I'm more of like a beach guy and a city guy, I guess. Like, having it kind of close, happy medium for all that, I think is something I like and enjoy. And you can get the best of both worlds here in El Salvador too.
Yes, sir. I was in the cab on the way over here, and I just asked the guy, how has El Salvador changed with my broken, shitty Spanish?
Yours is better than mine, dude. Don't discredit yourself. You were actually like able to help me out.
Oh man, yeah. I was practicing on the ride over here, just talking to this guy, and I'm sure he's thinking they appreciate when you try. But there's no chance I'm speaking coherently, and I just asked him, how have things changed? What do you think about Bukele? And this guy told me, and it's hard to understand this, but how much more dangerous El Salvador was just 6 or 7 years ago, which is like a blink of an eye. That's 2018. Things were like drastically different. And I asked him, like, for like in the whole country, like, this is not just in San Salvador. It's not like, oh, we cleaned up Chicago. It's like, no, they literally went and cleaned up the entire country. Yeah. And so people are able to walk around at night. There's obviously more tourism. He said there was zero tourism in 2018. And it's just really hard for us as an American to like wrap our heads around like what that actually means, not just because of Bitcoin and Bukele having the foresight to buy Bitcoin, but just having the foresight or the ability to actually just say, we are going to enforce law and order. Yeah. And then the impacts down the road of that. So I think as crazy as things have gotten in the US, I'm optimistic that if we get some law and order, we don't even necessarily need to end the Fed and audit the Fed and all this stuff that I hope happens like one day, but it's very unlikely that this stuff's going to happen in the next 4 years. Like, we can see a significantly night and day improvement on our country just with enforcing laws, just with RFK coming in and, fixing up some of the healthcare stuff. And man, I'm super stoked coming down here. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm not really looking to move down here necessarily, but spend more time here for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, on that too, like kind of the violence and the cleanup and everything, I feel extremely safe here. I was born in Chicago. Obviously, you guys heard me rant about the Bears already earlier, but I mean, there's serious issues in the U.S. that need to get fixed, where I don't want to move, but, if the whole country became like Chicago, I mean, what can you do there? Like, look, Lil Durk, for those who don't know, go down the rabbit hole. He's like this big time rapper from Chicago. He's from the worst neighborhood in the country called O Block. Tons of murders over there. They called Chicago Chirac for a while because there's more murders in Iraq or in Chicago than Iraq. It's basically gone down this path where Lil Durk is in prison right now in Miami, Dade County, but he paid the mayor of Chicago $150,000 for his campaign. So why hasn't O Block been cleaned up? It's because the people are just like, the gangs are funding all this stuff, but no publicity is being around this stuff because it's a very big, like, democratic city and people don't want to talk about it. But it's a serious issue. Like, you think corruption will never happen in the U.S. Chicago's the most corrupt city in the United States, and it's point blank, like, not even close. And look what happens when a gang runs a country. It becomes the most violent country in the world. Chicago is one of the most violent cities in the world right now because of, it's run by the gangs. And so with all that, the U.S. needs to be cleaned up a little bit, or, in certain, major metropolises. But the U.S. is a great country. The reason the U.S. prospered is because it really invested in the entrepreneur. So I'm optimistic, but there is some shit that needs to be fixed. So, Bukele's done a great job where I don't really see too much that needs to be fixed. It requires a lot of development. So if you're going to buy stock in a company, I think this is like buying Bitcoin, years ago, maybe 2014, 15. So like, it's still some waves. You're going to ride it up and down, and, it's not going to be smooth sailing on the way up, but I'm very optimistic about El Salvador, where I think, the U.S. right now is like Amazon right now, where it's like a heavy hitter stock. It can continue to go up, but, you're like, where's the growth going to come? Is like some changes going to be made in order to continue to increase it and make it better? Or is it going to take a turn for the worse? We don't really know. Time will tell. I'm optimistic with the new leadership coming in that they're going to help clean some of this stuff up. But long story short, I do think the U.S. is a great country, but needs to be cleaned up a little bit in order to keep the talent there. Some is leaving, but not all. I mean, you and I are still there. We're traveling, but we're still there. And I think, they got to limit the ways that they're going to push people out.
There's a lot of people here that are visionaries thinking long-term into the future. I've had so many conversations of people, like even the property that we're sitting on right now, 12 months ago, they told me that the floor had water coming up through these old cement little kind of squares, and people are investing here. They're thinking long-term, not just buying Bitcoin and holding, but saying like, okay, what is the place that we want to build around? And there's a lot of people building around here. I'm super stoked to have been exposed to this. Wouldn't be here without Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Man, thank you so much for sharing some of your story. And where can people find you and follow you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. It's an honor to come on the pod and get to know you over the years, man, with all this stuff. But yeah, you can find me, Green Candle, on YouTube, Green Candle Investments Podcast with Brandon Keys now, on wherever you get audio podcasts, and then Green Candle IT on all social medias, Twitter, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that. And yeah, just connect with me. Hope you guys enjoyed some of this and follow along. And yeah, hit that like and subscribe button for my guy right here, man. He's out here grinding. I know you guys don't see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, but just know my man Kyle here is working his ass off trying to spread the word. And yeah, man, it's an honor to get to know you for these past couple years for sure.
Appreciate you, Brandon. Happy to be part of it, man.
All right, man.
Appreciate you.